Today we're going to make a quilt-as-you-go Christmas tree skirt. Now as you can see, I have started on this. I've got 3 of the panels finished. It's going to be beautiful when it's done. This entire skirt will take 16 panels to make the full circle. I've watched a lot of tutorials online looking for an actual pattern for this triangle, and that's the one thing that's lacking. Everybody of course wants you to buy their pattern. Well, you don't have to. I'm going to show you exactly how we draw this pattern, and if you can learn how to do it one time, you can learn how to do it 16 times, and we'll end up with a beautiful tree skirt. So here's the template that I've drawn, and I want to talk about the dimensions here because you may not be able to see clearly enough. This is a piece of brown paper. It is 17 3/4 inches from the top end of this panel to the bottom end. So that's your first cut, all right? Then the top piece of this only measures 1.5 inches, but the bottom piece of this measures 8.5 inches wide, all right? When you end up cutting this out, your angles will measure 18 inches. So if you can do that, you are in business because this is the template for all 16 panels of this tree skirt. So the next thing you want to think about is your backing and your batting, because remember, this is a quilt-as-you-go project. So I have chosen a backing that's just a really pretty green fabric, because you know, quilt-as-you-go, we're going to see our seams on some of these things, so you want to make sure it's something you can live with. The actual template we just drew is the actual size of the batting that you will cut, okay? I'm going to lay this over the batting and you can see that's exactly right. Now, my backing, my green fabric, has to be 1 inch larger on all sides, okay? Now, the easy way to do that is, of course, take your ruler, and I can go a 1 inch mark here, and I can cut it that way. So it's very simple to cut. Your backing is 1 inch. Your backing is 1 inch larger than your batting, okay? Now, when you get these two things cut out, of course, you just want to fasten them down. And the easiest way to do that is with a glue stick. You could also spray baste it, but I'm just going to use a couple of lines of that water-soluble glue stick, pat it down, and then we are ready to talk about our fabric choices. Okay, now we have our template cut out. This is 1 of 16. I've just flipped it over so I can make some notes on here to help you kind of determine what the next steps are. If you remember, each panel was different fabric strips laid out at an angle. So what I did first is I wanted to draw those angles. If you've got one of these quilting rulers, you've got angle lines on here. I've got a 30-degree angle line on my ruler. I'm going to line that up with the bottom of the template. So my 30-degree line is here. I want it to be 2 inches deep. So I'm just going to slide the ruler over until I get a 2-inch depth, and I drew that line. That's the key to this. Once you've drawn your first line, the rest is simple because all you're going to do is every 2 inches, draw the next line. Every 2 inches all the way up, okay? So, like I said, these are going to represent different types of fabric, and we'll get into the fabric choices next. But I want you to see, for this little corner, it's going to require a 6-inch strip of fabric. The next one is 9 inches of fabric. I've laid out some of these measurements here so you can kind of know what to cut. And also the circled number next to each measurement, that's the quantity you want. So at the top of this, it's a 4-inch strip, but you're going to need 12 of them for this entire tree skirt. So go ahead and cut 12 of each of your fabrics. I'm choosing 4 different fabrics. So again, 8 of those, 12 of those, 8 of those. You can read this down the list pretty easily. So next we'll talk about fabrics. So fabric choices. I showed you earlier the beautiful green we've chosen for the back. The backing that you want to get for this project, you need to have 2 yards of backing total. That will cover the entire Christmas tree skirt project. Likewise, 2 yards of the batting. That's going to be very important. So now we've got our template. I want to show you the fabrics that I've chosen. I have only chosen 4 different varieties. They all look Christmassy, they all look great, and they're going to go together. So what's important about this And the lines that we have drawn is these lines represent a different type of fabric. So if you'll look at these, I have cut these fabrics into strips that are 2.5 inches wide. That's the same width as a jelly roll. So if you have jelly roll strips, you can certainly use those for this project, okay? And once you've cut all these and you've cut the lengths that you need, the next step of this is we're really going to be arranging these in the quilt-as-you-go method across the whole template like that. That's how we make this entire design. It's very simple to do and you're going to love it. Okay, so we're back. So here's where we're at. We have our nice backing with our batting attached to it. We're going to next decorate this panel, and I'll show you how we do that with the different fabric strips, and then we're going to also join it to another panel. So let's get started. We are ready to decorate this panel. Now, if you recall, on our original template, I put some measurements on how wide or how long these strips ought to be. And I have cut my 4 different fabrics. I'm going to lay them out here in a second. But first, I want to show you. I'm going to draw some lines. Like, here's my first line. And the way I found it was, find your 30-degree angle line on your ruler, match it up to the bottom of the batting, okay? And then make sure we have 2 inches of depth. So I went from this corner and I counted out 2 inches and drew my line. That's most helpful because every 2 inches now, we can draw the next and the next. And I'm not going to go all the way across this, but I want to start in the middle of this project. So I'm going to do one more. And I want my first couple of pieces to be right in here or right in here because those are the largest. But first, let me show you what I'm talking about. These are going to lay across the panel like, oh, it would help if I did them in the right order, from the bottom up to the top. This is the design that we're going to use. And it really comes out beautifully. We'll do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on that. So that's what we're going for on this, okay? Now I want to start with my largest strips. So I'm going to choose strip number 3 and 4. We'll put the rest of these away for now. So strips 3 and 4, if you'll look, this is where strip 1, 2, here's where 3 goes, here's where 4 goes, right? Now, 3 should lay here and 4 should go over it, but we've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance to play with here. So I want to take another colored pen, and just on this line, which will be a stitching line, I want to draw a 1/4 inch line away from it. That is going to tell me that the edge of my fabric, the raw edge of my fabric, should line up with the pink line, all right? Now I will put this on top of it, and I am going to sew a line from batting to batting with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and this is the beginning. So let's move over to the sewing machine. So now is the fun part because we get to decorate this panel. We've already laid out fabric strip number 3 and 4, right? And they are right sides together. I'm going to do my 1/4 inch stitch. I'm going to set the seam and I'm going to press it open. And all I'm going to do is add strip number 2, strip number 1, and all these strips all the way up. And then you'll see the magic take place. It's really, really cool. So it's coming along really nicely. Now, the next thing we have to do, this is a cool part too. We're going to trim this. And I am going to stand up so I can see pretty well. Flip this over onto its front and pull the backing back. We want to take a look and see that batting, okay? I'm going to take my ruler and place it along this edge. I'm going to trim all the extra fabric off. If I take a little piece of, if my batting's stretched out a little while I iron, that's okay, that may happen. I just want to trim all this off. And if a little piece of batting comes off with it, so be it. That's not a big deal. And, all right, let's get these out of the way. Have a little more to trim there. And that. So we're going to trim this on all four sides, just right up to the batting. And you're going to love the result because it's really pretty. That's good. Okay. So now what we have left is, oh, got one little straggler here. Hold on. Now what we have is the panel. It's ready, and it's actually quite beautiful. So the next thing we want to talk about is joining it to the rest of the Christmas tree skirt. And so what I'm going to show you is, I want to point something out first. Here's one we just finished, but look at the three that have been put together. The pattern, the way I've laid these patterns out, I have staggered them. I have my four fabrics, but I've done them in the exact same sequence. So I've taken one panel, and for the next one, I have moved each fabric down a notch. And actually, I've moved it up a notch. The next panel, I've moved each fabric up a notch again. So if you can see this, it's starting to make a swirl pattern, and that's the beauty of what we're doing here. It's going to be a really nice finish. So here was the end where I left off. Here is a new panel, which is going to match up to it. And I can take a look at my fabrics. They're exactly lined up, so that's what I want. Now remember, this is quilt-as-you-go. So we are going to join these two together. I'm going to line them up and pull this extra fabric up. It's important to look down at this because you want to make sure your tops kind of line up and your bottoms line up, right? Now we're going to take this and I'm just going to lift it up and take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch a line from the beginning of this corner here to the end of this panel right here. I'm not going to stitch through any of the batting. Okay, so at this point, we have just joined this panel to the rest of the tree skirt. So I want you to understand that we have two flaps of fabric here, one in the front and one in the back. Now all we're going to do is take each one, we're going to fold it in half, we're going to fold it in half again, and we're going to run a stitch line across it. So it's very simple to do. But I'm going to work, my glasses. I'm going to work away from myself first. So I'm going to start with this one. And when I do the double fold, I'm going to have my iron ready because I'm just going to press that down as I go. I'm only doing one side. Don't try to do both sides at the same time. See, this is going to be just fine. Pressing down. And let me show that to you. So So I have just folded that down, as you can see, and I'm going to stitch a line on this one piece right now to hold it down. And again, I'm starting at the fabric line. I'm not starting at the far end. And stop where the fabric ends. That's nice. Now I'm going to do the same for the other piece here. I'm going to fold it in half again, and just set the iron on it as I go. This kind of joining in quilt-as-you-go, I think it's really attractive. It's really important that you choose a good fabric, though. I mean, if I chose some ugly backing fabric and I saw all these strips of it, I would not be happy. So make sure you choose something that you can live with, because you will see a lot of these seams. But it's okay. It's part of the charm of that whole quilting process. All right, I've pressed that down, so I'm just going to stitch a seam along there. Start at the fabric line and end at the other fabric line. And now we have 16 beautiful panels. And look, I've stitched them all together. So we're near done on this, but I want to point a couple of things out. When you lay this out flat, the 16, do they meet right here at the center? No, they're just a little bit off, and there's a reason for that. This is laying flat. When you raise these up to put around your tree, these panels come together. That's just how the circle works. So there's a couple of things we have to learn. We're going to hem the inside circle and we're going to hem the outside circle, just in the same way that we did these. We're just going to fold in half, fold again, and stitch it. But take a look at the inside circle. If you're going to hem a smaller inside circle and you're hemming out to a larger circle, you normally would snip, 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 right? Because there's not enough fabric to do that. Well, this is the reason why, look, each one of these is separate. We never sewed all of these panels together on the seam allowance on either end. That way I can treat this separately from all the rest. So I'm going to fold it over once, fold it over twice, and then we will stitch it. So I've already kind of folded half of these over. I've just put some clips in place, and I'm going to do a stitching line. I think I might do a zigzag stitch across this top. You know, you don't have to do that. You can do a straight stitch. It'll still be the same. Now, same thing goes with the bottom of our tree skirt. Now, on the bottom, it's just the opposite. We're hemming a larger circle. We're hemming it up to a slightly smaller circle. That means we would have extra fabric on the end of each one of these, and we don't want extra fabric. But because we kept each one of these separate, each panel was separate, we didn't sew all the way to the end, I'm folding the corners up once, then I will do my one fold and two fold, and I will pin those up and we can sew them. I'm going to stitch each panel as its own separate thing. I'm going to do a little back stitch before it and a back stitch at the end of it. So I'll do that 16 separate times. And then we're going to be done. Now you can see I have already folded these up and I've just used some clips. I used a steam iron to iron it down. Do yourself a favor and take that extra minute to do it, because it makes a difference. Look, I can pull these clips off, and that's still going to be, it's held down well enough that I should be able to sew this very easily. So that's the next step. We're going to go over to the sewing machine. And this is the final product. Isn't it gorgeous? It really is. I absolutely love this project, and it was a lot of fun to do. You'll notice I did not put ties, or some people tie their skirt together in the back of the tree, because I just don't believe in them. I mean, if you tie this to your tree and you have a cat or a dog that paws at your tree skirt, you don't want the whole tree tumbling down. So I did not put ties on mine, but you can certainly do that for yours. And look, this was a quilt-as-you-go project, so the back is already quilted. So this is so great. I am so happy with it. Put on some Christmas music and get started making your own.